We started Leon because we were travelling a lot and we wanted to eat food, fast food on the go, and all we could eat was either really cold sandwiches in slightly grim neon-lit chiller cabinets, or really delicious, greasy fast food that tasted great, that made you fall asleep, and then you woke up feeling a bit guilty and a bit greasy. And we thought, why can't there be good fast food that tastes good and does you good? And it's one of those ideas that everyone said, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. And you're like, no, it's not. It's an obvious idea, and the question is, how do you actually make that idea into reality?
Well, we sort of had this idea, I think, when Nick Park went to pitch, it might not be true, but it's a good story. When he went to pitch Chicken Run to the American film companies, all these, they flew him over. They had all these people around the boardroom, and they said, "So Nick, tell us your idea." And he said, "Well, it's like The Great Escape, but with chickens." And they went, "Yeah, we like it." And he got on his plane and he went back again. I think you have to have maybe a simple idea that drives you, and that touchstone for us was if God did fast food. So it was like, okay, if God did fast food, it would be a bit like fast food, but in some ways it would be completely different. And so we had this sort of image of, you maybe you die, you go to heaven, you have art class with Leonardo da Vinci, and then he says, let's go to McDonald's, or a fast food joint. And the idea was, okay, what would it be like? And we said, well, it would be uncannily like a fast food joint in its processes, in its format, in the fact that it would use a kitchen and a chute, and it would use a fast food type of system. But it would be actually fantastic ingredients going through that system, just as tasty, in a warm environment, served by people that don't have a script, but still speak from the heart in terms of how they serve you. And that was really what drove us, wasn't it, in terms of the vision. The idea really was based on the idea of fruit packaging, because we thought, okay, is there a brand that exists in food where it doesn't say it's come from a factory? Because a lot of brands, be it in soap powder or food, they say, look, this is a brand because it's come from our factory. And what we wanted to do was have a brand which said, okay, we have taken these fantastic ingredients, like the man from Del Monte, and we have brought them to you extremely fresh. And that also tied in with the whole Mediterranean idea, in terms of the provenance of some of the food, the fact that we cook with olive oil. So there's a vague fruit packaging thing going on. And it's interesting to say that the brand is recognisable, because actually we don't have a Leon logo. And I think what we wanted to do was to have this great flexibility so that you immediately looked at a sticker and went, well, that must be a Leon sticker. But it's actually, it's different from that sticker, from that sticker, from that sticker. So it was a challenge to get to something which was immediately recognisable, but massively flexible in terms of the amount of iterations and manifestations that it can have.
So it starts with this idea of the good life, which is things that do good and are good for you.
And lovely.
And are lovely and do good. So, all things that do you good are kind of traditionally associated with some kind of sacrifice, like going jogging in the rain, and things that are lovely are meant to feel guilty about having an expensive holiday. And John went away and kind of wrote this down. And actually that was the point at which I think, as we've grown, the reason the intensity of the brand has stayed quite intense is because we're always going back to something. It's so easy. It can go wrong in so many different ways, a brand. You can just slightly over-exaggerate it, it becomes a bit pastiche. You can slightly over-exaggerate it another way, and it becomes a bit kind of too much carnival, too much like fairground. And by having it written down and constantly, John is particularly constantly pulling us back to what the essence of it is. I think that's the only way, that constant focus on what it is you're trying to communicate, that keeps it kind of intense and vibrant.
Leon the person is my dad. I think it's fair to say that Leon has probably in his life spent about 20 minutes cooking, I would say, in his entire life. So it's not like Leon is a foodie. But Leon, we called it Leon because we were sort of, there's an old joke in the restaurant industry, which is you probably don't decide the name until the sign writer is standing above with the paintbrush saying, no, really, what do you want to call it? And we went through all sorts of different names. What we knew we wanted is, we knew we didn't want a pun, like Scissors Palace for your hairdressers. And we knew we didn't want something that was propositional, like Nutrilicious, which was a competitor at the time, someone that we heard about. And we wanted something that was very simple, that meant almost nothing, that is a blank sheet of paper that could become something to people over time. And I think that's really important, that when you're starting a company, you don't hem yourself in. So, for example, Amazon could have called itself the United States Bookstore, and it probably wouldn't have done as well, it wouldn't have expanded. And I think having something that can expand in a name, that looks good graphically, that has a sort of a hint at what it might be, something that is pan-European, that doesn't just come from one place, I think was where it came from. And it happened to be my dad's name.
In 2008, when Lehman's went bust, we had 2 bad weeks. I think everyone thought, oh, I'm going to bring in sandwiches into work for 2 weeks. And I thought, oh, this is a bit of a hassle. And then started eating again. So from a revenue side, it was fine. But what happened was we were in the middle of negotiations with the bank, and suddenly the capital side of things completely seized up. And actually, our bank, as we were going through negotiations to renew our debt, the relationship with our manager moved 3 times. It moved from, because they were restructuring, it moved from Reading up to Glasgow and then back down to London. So that was very, very hard. The capital side before the recession, you could kind of take for granted. It was quite easy. We had the money, and then suddenly all of these kind of half promises about money that would come completely seized up. So while the business was motoring through the recession and improving and improving and improving, we were spending much more time on trying to feed it with capital, which hadn't been a focus before the recession. So when we first started Leon, we raised money for the first site. We didn't have the money to open Leon in Carnaby Street, and we raised that through a bit of our own money, family money, and then through investment, actually from a friend of John's, business investor. And then further down the line, we brought in a private equity player as well, and raised some more money from them. And then from that, we also raised debt on the back of cash flows coming out of the business. And I think that the key thing with investors, the investors we've had, is actually all the way along, the investors understood the business. So we've been through deep recessions, banks closing up. All of the debates we've had with our investors have been, how do we get the money? But there's actually been an enormous amount of understanding and support on the business, which I think is critical to developing a brand, because if you've got people with very different ideas of which direction the business itself and the brand should go, it can be quite disruptive. Whereas we had a lot of inputs, a lot of help. We had a great property guy, some really good financial help from investors. They really brought restaurant experience. So I think we've been quite lucky to get a set of investors with good and varied experience, and also kind of real understanding of what Leon is and what Leon's about. The one instance, there's one instance of real theft of recipes. So a large chain took the superfood salad, which was, when we Googled superfood salad when we started, it hardly appeared on Google. Now if you Google superfood salad, it's everywhere. And they've taken the recipe literally exactly from the cookbook. And they had it, and I think it was you went in and saw it, or I went in and saw it, and it literally says superfood salad, and then it's completely the same recipe. And so in that instance, you think, have we done the right thing? But then you think, actually, any brand that has any other operation that really has pride won't want to steal from you anyway, and therefore something else is going to go wrong. Those people who are just nicking stuff.
But there have been some pretty good operators that have taken the sweet potato falafel out. Sweet potato falafel did not exist at all as an idea. Literally, we made a sweet potato thing because it was replacing the falafel on the menu. We said, oh, let's just call it the sweet potato falafel. You can now get a sweet potato falafel in Waitrose. You can get it in W.H. Smith. You can get it in, I was going to say a sandwich chain because I didn't want to be nasty. And so it's like, oh, you know, wow, we create these things. And so I think, honestly, I think the impact that we've made is probably as much through other people's businesses as it is through our own. It's really important when you start a business and you have your own business to understand the nature of the growth cycle in that. Because we've chosen a business which actually, until you get to about 20 restaurants, is very capital intensive. And so unlike, say, an FMCG business where you might be able to take on £200,000 of third-party money and get to £100 million business a la Innocent, you know, we've chosen a business that actually needs £450,000 every time you open a new restaurant. So, but the good news is once you get to say about 20 restaurants, the cash flows coming from that entity, that business, are then enough to sustain it and to grow it organically through cash flows. And so our real milestone is when can we get to a point where all of the growth is coming internally from the cash flows that the business is generating. And it's between 15 and 20 restaurants where that happens. At the highest level, as CEOs, we both had decision-making power. Although we had almost these functional roles separately, the decision-making was joint. Now that was great during the first phases because we could tag team it when the other one was tired because we'd been working all night. There was a tag teaming that went on. As the business matured, it became clear that two sets of hands on the steering wheel doesn't work. So Henry, who was already operationally running the business, has become the CEO, if you can have a CEO of 9 restaurants. And I have become someone who has continued to input on the concept and the brand and the people, but I've left Henry to actually be the operator and running the business. And I think now that works well. I think we've definitely clashed. I'm sure, you know, Gordon Brown, although we're not as powerful as them, but Gordon Brown and Tony Blair will tell you that there are clashes that take place. I'm sure Lennon and McCartney had the odd argument. But I think there's a strength there, and a strength at the most fundamental level of great respect and love for each other. But definitely operationally, we have disagreements. And I think we've learned to kind of accept those and get over them.